really excited for this new episode of the Bell Curve podcast and to have Marcus Viereckl on with us, who we've known for now a decade. I think almost on the nose. I remember the moment meeting you, Marcus, at Cornell, because we were both engineers. You're an electrical and computer engineer, and I was a chemical engineer, and Jake was making money as an econ major. And I remember meeting you and just being struck back then by how thoughtful you were. You know, someone who I was surprised you were an ECE major, the acronym for electrical computer engineering, because I remember us talking about something that was entirely unrelated to engineering among a bunch of engineers. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I want to get to know this guy more. And I think that like translates so well into like your career, where then you took this interesting job with Blackstone, which for those who don't know Blackstone, it's I think the largest fund in the US, let alone one of the biggest in the global scene, that is multi industry and very diversified, especially with recent kind of consumer press among the real estate investors. So you worked there, ascended to the vice president level, and then made the leap to start your own company with some of your co-founders, Alias, where you're now CTO and co-founder. And so I think it's great to have you on, because I think especially for those who might come from backgrounds that are perhaps unconventional for startup founders, for those who might have multiple interests and not just be relegated to one particular field or study, and those who like really want to use their immediate post-grad experience to kind of as an immersive learning experience and like network kind of content skill development experience. I feel like you're the poster child for that in many ways. And so now you can stop blushing, and we'll get into a normal conversation. But I'm really excited, glad we can have you on the podcast here, Marcus, and looking forward to kind of just digging into some of your background here.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate the compliments, and agreed. And thank you for having me. I think it's so cool you guys are doing this.
I don't think I've ever talked to somebody. Did you specifically do tech at Blackstone, or were you like doing like other stuff and like investments and all that kind of stuff as well while you were there?
So I think at Blackstone, like I was in pure tech, but we all kind of wanted to be identified as not pure tech. So we'd all kind of say that like we were doing financy stuff. So I was doing fund accounting there. So like you get access to like how private equity works, but nothing deal side, nothing related to making decisions on what we're investing in, that sort of stuff. Gotcha. And I got into that. I kind of liked the Blackstone label, like coming out of college, but it was pure tech to start. But it's kind of that, and I liked it a lot. I definitely have good memories of Blackstone, but it's kind of awkward sometimes working for technology in a company that doesn't do technology, because you're just treated, it's way more of the back office effect. It's way more of like your support staff, and that your client is actually the business, versus now my client is actually real clients, right? And that's a big difference in terms of like how you're valued, how you're motivated, and building like actual tech versus support tech. That was a good transition for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely want to dive into so for us, those are the two like dichotomies of your experience, right? So like you've done technology, but basically like the user is completely different between like the company that it is you worked for, and then now like you're client facing in terms of like the products that it is that you're building. And you're down in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, down in Austin, Texas. And to speak a little bit about that, so it's like we were the back office technology, and then we were actually supporting the back office of Blackstone too. So it's like multiple tiers back behind the revenue. And like for some, that doesn't bother you. Like some people are totally fine being all tech, but I think I was always wired a little bit more business wise and wanting to build, like, I want to think about bottom line of technology. I want to think about the value that it offers. And I think that's where my skill set lies too. And that's why I love my new role, is thinking way more about like, why does technology matter, and being creative about building the right technology, not just building technology for technology's sake. Because I think at Blackstone a lot, like you end up just kind of building tech because you have a tech department and that's what tech people do. But the kind of the vision to actually impact the bottom line is not there so much. And I think it's really gratifying for me to be in a position like this. But I think most people would enjoy that as well. And yeah, Austin, Texas is pretty dope. So yeah, my experience for that is like COVID kicked in New York. And I remember I was still at Blackstone at the time, and we were all in the office, and we're like, guys, this is it. Like, this is it was like a Friday, and we're like, we're not going to see each other again. And honestly, I did see them when I left, but it was like, we're like, this is totally going to be over. And then that was a hard hit. I think this is a big work from home thing, but I think everybody in the beginning was kind of like, I love it, working hard. And then like 3 months it lasted, and then the burnout kicked in. And I think this is global.
Yeah.
I think you guys have probably heard about this. The burnout kick, and I'm still working from home now. We're trying to get an office here. Different motivation factors, but I remember that. And then I started nomading. That was kind of the cool thing in digital nomad or whatever, which is cool in tech because you can actually do that as long as you have kind of a remote job and you're a little bit like less meeting based. You could do that. So enjoyed nomading, and then just to talk about Alias a little bit, the kind of how that happened was, I think I was kind of a little bit just dissatisfied. I think a lot in technology is like, we'll go to bars with like my friends and all the people that worked at Blackstone. We talk about our startup ideas and like, oh man, I could totally leave here and do that. But it takes a certain impetus to actually do it. Like, yeah, you do have a good idea, and yeah, that is a good idea. You are really smart, but are you going to get the financing? Are you going to put yourself on the line? Are you going to leave your cozy salary and actually do it? So I was one of those guys, to be honest. It was pretty difficult. Tom knows this even. I probably talked to Tom about like some of my ideas and stuff, but it's pretty hard to leave. So I was kind of a little bit jaded, dissatisfied, thinking like, the midlife crisis or quarter life crisis, whatever. Like, I got to do something here. I don't want to look back with regrets. And then honestly, for me, it happened of just somebody reached out on LinkedIn. And that's kind of how it started. He's like, hey, I'm trying to found a company. He knew me through a reference at Blackstone. The ex-CTO of Blackstone kind of knew him, and he was looking for some talent. And then I was like, okay, tell me more. Want to get to know you. So we had a phone call, and I'm like, yep, this is a guy. This is a partner here. And I'm like, okay, how do you make this work? So I come in and like I spend a week building literally a technical plan of what we're going to be doing in 3 months, 6 months, and a year. This is how it impacts bottom line. This is how it impacts revenue. This is how we're going to build a tech business. And I think that was impressive. And we've just continued from there at this point, building that out. And yeah, that's kind of like, I would be lying if I said that I was the guy that just kind of came out of college like a Zuckerberg and is just like, I'm going to do this, puts it all on the line. I needed a little help, to be honest. I needed a pathway and sort of a structure. But now in this, like, I've grown in this role to the point where like, I would feel like I'm not going back to corporate life. I'll tell you, this business doesn't work and I'm not going back ever to corporate life. I will, like, it's from The Office when Michael Scott's talking about his paper company. He's like, I'll just start another paper company. Like, I would do that at this point. Like, I will continue to make Marcus paper companies until my end of days, and I'll keep fighting because just the experience and the ownership and like, it's my baby sort of thing is just such a difference factor. So that's it in a nutshell. I could talk for probably an hour straight, so I'll end it back. But I think I did have a pretty interesting experience getting here, and I think there's actually a large volume of people like me in the situation I was in, even larger than some that you're going to found successful startups or something. Like there's a big market of people that are really competent that are in positions where they're not meeting their full potential. And I kind of said earlier, like I kind of got a little bit lucky to get out by just like, God's will almost to just like find the right path. And it kind of came to me. But also, like, I mean, you have to have an attitude for it too, and you have to succeed in the role as well. But you have to have, you have to have the energy, and you do have to take a step out there too. Like, if you're working at a nice company, like you're walking away from a fair amount of money, you're walking away from a network, and obviously you're not going to burn a bridge, and you maintain that network. But like, you built within the company a lot of rapport, and you're investing all of your human capital into the company. So it's a big deal to leave that. But yeah, I mean, I could speak more to it, but there's so much more unbounded upside in building your own thing. And I think especially with technology too, like ownership is a really big thing with technology. If you're working in a corporate company, you're more of a contributor and you don't own any of your IP. And it's not necessarily about like ownership, like direct kind of like equity or something in your IP. It's more of like, who calls the shots and who decides what you code. And I like to think on my team, and I'll talk about the way that I run my team, but like all of us own it. It's very much shared, and I want to maintain that. Versus, I always felt like you're kind of much more of a contributor. You're like just a cog in this giant matrix sort of thing. But it's really nice to actually own your own code stack and your kind of development of the company.
And so how do you land on, so you did ECE at Cornell, electrical computer engineering. How do you land on that? Like when you're making the decision to actually declare or go to university, and then were you like a pretty good student, I guess, in the traditional sense?
So I would say I've always been a late bloomer on a lot of things in my life. Like I think I'm still maturing, and I think I'm immature in a lot of ways, but I still see my maturity. So honestly, like in college, I had no idea. I knew it was engineering. I knew it was either going to be like law or like econ or finance, or it was going to be engineering. I had a long conversation with my dad senior year, and I'm like, you know what, like let's go with the engineering route. I always like computer games, always like computers. So then I went in there and I went agnostic. I went into Cornell. I had no idea what I was going to be. I was like, chemie sounded cool, mechy sounded cool. And then I took some classes, and honestly, like, I wasn't a super good student. Like I was doing decent. Like I was getting A's and B's for the most part, but I was just kind of confused. I didn't really know what I wanted. And then I started noticing that computer science was a very, very lucrative field. So that was a piece of it, was that you start to see who's graduating. You're looking what's happening with the Google, Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, and you're like, okay, there's something going on there. But like, it wasn't purely that. I've always been in, and I was electrical computer engineer, to be honest. To describe the difference a little bit is that like, that's lower level. That's actually like how computers work. It's not necessarily how software works. So I went into that. I went into EC saying, I like computers. I like electricity. I love Tesla. Nikola Tesla's like one of my idols. So I was like, that's really cool. But then I started noticing, and I was doing it, that like, like the circuit diagrams and like resistors, capacitors, inductors, and then they put thousands of these on a page, and I'm like, I can't do this. Like, it's not fun. I'm suck at it. Some Tesla's doing so bad on those. So I was like, okay, we got to get out of this. So then I went to more of the higher level of ECE, which is closer to software. It's all this kind of bridge of abstraction. So I went into that, and then I started liking it. And I graduated as an ECE, so not even as a computer scientist. But if you're at like kind of the top highest level abstraction in ECE, it's kind of like you're pretty close to software. You kind of get software. You've taken some of the classes to do software. And then honestly, I was always scared of interviews. I still am scared of interviews. I really don't like interviewing for jobs. It puts a lot of, honestly, like social pressure and anxiety in me. I remember the career fairs at Cornell, and you'd have all these booths set up and the lines, and I'm waiting in line, and I'm like, all these people have better GPAs. They're all really smart. They can all answer these ridiculous coding questions. And I would get into the Google line, I'd wait there, and I'd get so stressed, I'd leave. And then I'd find excuses to leave. So my application rate was really, really low. I didn't even apply to a lot of jobs. I remember just Blackstone. I think I just like approached it at a career fair and just talked to some guys. I wasn't even really that interested. But then it ended up that kind of the lack of that was, honestly, I came out of college with like two job offers. One was with IBM and one was with Blackstone, which is pretty, like, that's not that impressive for a lot of my, so my roommate it was the Googles and the Facebooks and the Pinterest, all these awesome jobs. And I went to Blackstone because of that idea that it was going to be a little bit more financy. It was a little bit more unique. Maybe there would be upside to even pivot into a finance role, and I'm going to get exposed to people. And I was totally right. Going into Blackstone, I think the culture there was really powerful. And I think culturally, if I would have went to like IBM, let's say, I would have become great at my craft. I would have probably been an awesome, developer, or been good on computers, something like that. I would have been great at the craft. But Blackstone taught me how to be a professional, and they taught me how to like grow as a leader and as a manager. And that was kind of the expectation, and the growth pattern there was that all you're striving towards is like getting better at like communicating, coming up with ideas, delivering value, and like that stuck in my mind. And I had really good management, really good bosses that I clicked with very well. And I think that like those, like, I think 6 years that I was at Blackstone, those were very, very formative to me to really round me out. And it's kind of that late bloomer. I think some people, like, I'd even look at them like a private equity guy in Blackstone that comes and he's fresh out of college. Like, these guys are so well-rounded and they know how to speak and everything. I was coming in there and I was getting in all sorts of like trouble, not professionally, but just like I wasn't saying the right stuff. I just didn't have that polish. So I needed that kind of phase to get that polish at Blackstone. I couldn't have landed this job. I would not have landed this job even 2 years before the opportunity arose. I don't think. I think I saturated all of that time with learning from the right managers, growing as a manager too. Like the opportunity there, one really cool program at Blackstone was the internship program. And I really like this. So as like you could be in there for 2 years and you could get your own intern. And like, that's something that doesn't happen a lot at other companies. I thought that was kind of interesting that you could have practically no experience and you somehow get an intern. Now, what does that mean? You could think of that in a lot of different ways, but what it actually means is that you're learning how to manage somebody and take the pressures of management and be like, what am I going to do with this intern? And then you're kind of competing with your other people who can make their intern the best intern and make their intern have the best summer. So like make them happy, make them motivated, but also the most valuable summer. Make sure their project is important and that they do a good job on it. So I would get an intern. I think I went through 3 or 4 interns. One of the interns is a very, very good friend of mine. And I'd love to get him on my team someday. But I went through a lot of interns, and I think that growth pattern was good. And then I eventually went into managing a team too. And you learn the do's and don'ts too. Like Blackstone was great, but then I'd look at a manager and I'd say, I don't like that. I don't really like how he runs his team. I don't think that that's the best way to do it. And then I'd look at a manager and be like, that guy has inspiration. That team looks like they're pretty good. So you kind of learn what not to do and what to do. And then now I have the opportunity to show my cards and be like, okay, I've learned all this stuff. Can I do it? Can I be a good manager? Can I be a good leader? Can I bring all those skill sets and actually deliver it? And I'd like to think I'm doing an okay job of that, but you're still learning. You're still learning a lot too. But I think something about Alias that I like too is like, now I'm learning about business, and that's a big difference. Like I saturated the technology a while ago. I kind of saturated management, not saturated, but I'm at the 70% or something. But the business side of it, I never really got. Like, how do you run a business? What is revenue? What are cash flows? And like, what are we trying to do here? What's a projection? How do you get funding? All of these things were things that like I was always like I was hidden away from me because it didn't matter. Like you're just like the Blackstone, like we call him like Uncle Steve, Steve Schwartzman. You're just like he's just throwing money at the tech department. You don't have any problem for it. So yeah, that was a really good experience to have it and continue to have at Alias is how do I turn technology into money? And that is kind of what it is at the end of the day, coming up with creative ways to impact the bottom line of the business, and then also getting buy-in both internally from leadership as well as buy-in from clients, and making sure that like people are kind of satisfied with what we're doing, and from the employees at large. To tell you a little bit about Alias is not an entirely tech company. So right now we do background checks and due diligence. To specify a little bit, we're more on the side, not so much of like an employment. Some of our competitors are more in terms of like volumes, millions and millions of employment for like Uber or something. We're much more on, conveniently coming from Blackstone, more of the business side of if I'm going to invest in a deal or a set of companies like venture capital, private equity, real estate for lending. We're more on the like very specific investment side. So we do deeper searches. But starting off, we start off as a service company, and we have a nice service company right now that does a lot of reports and has revenue coming through the door, which is great. But the idea is to scale that to 10x that to 100x that. You need to introduce technology, because in order to do a background search, which is going to be, I want to look up their criminal, civil, bankruptcies, tax things, UCCs, whatever. The only way to do that is with automation, and then also experience. How does a client experience the background check? PDFs, those are totally 20th century. Like we got to get into web applications and like, dynamic design, cell phones, tablets, that sort of stuff too. So technology here is trying to 10x and beat our competitors in the market using technology. But still, we're always going to have expert investigators that gradually transition less from doing the work they don't even want to do, which is doing like ridiculous browsing and creating PDFs, towards doing more in analytics and doing analysis and reconciliation and using their actual IQ to solve challenging problems rather than doing just dummy work over and over and over again on computers. And I think that people are sometimes scared of automation, and people are scared of AI. If you've been working and doing things for the same way a lot of time, I have never seen in my career that anybody in terms of like kind of this the service industry loses their jobs or loses their value. They end up doing more interesting stuff, and they end up they deliver more value with technology, because technology, it just unlocks new dominions of value, and you can be even more valuable in these new dominions. So you're scared that you're going to lose your current role. You might, but you're going to be the one that gets this new role where you can be even more impactful, and you're going to like it a lot more because you're going to be doing more cerebral activities.
Yeah, I like that, Marcus. And I feel like you brought up some points where I want to step back in time a little bit to understand kind of how you built this skill set and this kind of awareness within the business context. So you mentioned, really intelligently, elegantly solving a difficult problem being kind of the name of the game for you right now. What I recall is, when we had conversations during your time, obviously at Blackstone, that almost that role seems to have primed you perfectly for this. And you can keep me honest here, but in terms of, you mentioned the polish that it gave you, but I recall the role almost being one where your job, if I describe it in one sentence, is to find the shortest path to solve the toughest problems. So you were rewarded by solving tough problems in the most elegant way, not necessarily by many. I can speak firsthand in being in like some corporate environments. You're rewarded for showing face, for showing up at the office early, leaving late. But you were rewarded by like the currency being you could solve problems better than other people. Do you feel like that was foundational?
Yes,
to what you're
and
doing?
I overlooked something, which is kind of exactly this. So like this kind of all triggered when I built something called Calculation Monitor. It was this little kind of tool that I built in my application, but this is the difference, is that nobody told me to build that. Everything that I was doing previous to that was assigned by management and told me to do that. That Calculation Monitor was, I looked at a problem that some people were talking about, they're like, oh, we want to be able to transparently see, how things are calculating or whatever. And I just built that completely in isolation, and it solved a problem that they didn't even know that they had. And like that almost triggered something in me that probably, I think, like a year later, that's when I went to BAM. BAM is the hedge fund group, and I was more aligned to the business. That's probably actually, I kind of overlooked that, a pretty big stepping stone of, I actually went from what was known as BXII or BXTI or BXI, two names, which is the core technical group. And someone came in to kind of lead BAM, and then he kind of took my team and brought it into BAM, Blackstone Alternative Asset Management. And at that point, I was way more aligned to the business. So at that point, I was like directly meeting with the business, still the business, not external clients. And I was able to build a brand new application. I named it, I called it Spotlight. I got a team to build this application. And I love that. That was like the first time that I was actually building something that was like brand new. I was solving new problems. I was building something that was impacting the value of Blackstone. But then I did have a burnout there of kind of the ownership role and the IP role of, yes, this is really cool, but what if I do this with like a different power structure and I can deliver that same kind of creative value? But I think that is a big pivot, particularly like I've never really been one for showing face. I'd say in a lot of ways, I'm like pseudo unprofessional, not unprofessional and like I say bad stuff, but in terms of, the polish, like sometimes like my tie wasn't always on straight. I didn't dress the best. I would show up, right before the meeting. I think it's because I don't care about those things. And this is a big thing with my team, is that like it's not really a big deal to me. Like I'll tell you when something's important, when I need you to be very professional, but generally speaking, I care about what you deliver and your attitude less than I care about any of that stuff that a lot of people are great at, and they actually invest a lot, which is that showing face and kind of pretending a lot. I just want to see like what value you deliver, and that's by far the most important thing to me. I don't know if that answers your question, but
it requires a lot of discipline. Basically, to keep like that, because when you're in management, when you're like lower level employers, like, man, like especially if you're a competent individual, I want to be comped, and I basically want to work as much in terms of me being able to solve the problem or get the objective done or the task done that was assigned to me from management, right? And then when you get into management, you have a boss, and then like you're just more ingrained into like the politics of the organization, and you're like, well, crap, you get a little bit more sidetracked about that kind of stuff. And then you look at your direct reports and you're like, when you see your direct report coming in and they don't have the tie straight, or maybe they don't have the polish that it is that you have there as a manager. And then you start kind of managing them based on showing face. I see a lot of folks doing that. I think that's probably, especially within banking and consulting and that kind of stuff, you see a lot more of that. In real estate, we see a lot of that. It's like, I would say that culture is a little bit a part of what it is. We have always kind of be responding to emails, showing face, speaking up during meetings, and like even if I don't really have anything valuable to add, and then on top of that, you have to work hard to also deliver the value. So That's now being in management, running a team at your own company, is it hard for you to like not go to like saving face or like showing face, like with your direct reports? Has it become easier for you as you're kind of in charge of the whole tech team, like for a company now, to just focus on having them deliver value? And then how do you get even the managers that work under you and all those people to stay focused on that, so you get to the outcomes that you're actually trying to achieve, which is advancing the business forward?
So, and I don't know, it could be because we're still pretty small, but I think I'd like to keep this positive attitude that I believe in terms of leadership, like leading by example. It's like, if you think about like an army, fighting another army, like you don't want to be the commander that's just dumb and runs in front and instantly dies either. I'm not saying that, but you want to be part of the army and you want to show that you have stakes. So I have this kind of like internal commitment that I'm always going to, and it's a competitive drive. I always deliver the most value. So I'm going to deliver so much value, and then you guys want to compete with me, but like I'm never going to be that guy that just says like I'm not really responsible for work. I'm responsible to allocate work. That's not who I am. Now, that doesn't mean that obviously I'm not going to scale if I'm working 200 hours a week or whatever. That's not really the point. But I think putting your own skin in the game, and then I think like in terms of like managing face, I think technology is a little bit different. I think just fundamentally it is a little bit different because it's just a different level of expectations at some degree. Like some of my my developers, like, oh, they're not putting their screen on or whatever, their video on when they're on a virtual call. Like, I don't care. That's fine. I want to see you like once a week, just make sure you're alive. But like that's not a big deal to me. In terms of like your for instance, like meetings, you said speaking up in meetings. I don't mind. Some of my developers, they're not really comfortable doing that. They're never going to be that one. And again, that's not important to me. What's important to me is, are you delivering value add tech to the company? And if you're doing that, you kind of get away with it a lot. Now, I will say this though. I also see certain people on my team that can grow in that area and want to grow in that area. And I do my best to, for instance, I have a tendency, even in this podcast, where I was like to steamroll in meetings. Like I'm extremely like loud and aggressive in talking, and I'm always the first to answer. So I sometimes need to like step back. But with some of my employees, like I'm trying to get them to speak up more, trying to get them to be more involved in that, trying to build the polish a little bit more professionalism. Kind of ones that I'm grooming, I guess. Weird saying that word. Ones that I'm growing to be essentially like what would be the tech lead or like my right hand man, kind of my management class sort of stuff. But
how many people work for you right now, Marcus?
So I have four direct kind of developers that work for me. And then the whole company is about I think like 30 in the United States. And I will say this is a thought that I've always had, and I feel like self-conscious actually, Jake, when people ask me that question, because like I almost feel like I should be like 400 people work for me because I'm going to feel better. Like it's like I should have a whole army over me. It's like some person asked me that's also in technology, oh, like how many people do you have working with you? And I'm like 4, and they're like, oh, okay. But this is the difference of like, I want to do more with 4, and I think I can do more with 4. 4 of the right people is worth more than 400 of not the right people, to say the least. So honestly, look, I've had conversations with my CEO all the time about hiring. You know, like how many people do I need? Am I going to extract like the maximum amount of value? Like we're not at a point where I could probably hire another 1 or 2 guys, but I wouldn't get very large because I think that you can do a lot. There's a reason why if you see Silicon Valley or you see what Zuckerberg does, like you don't really need to have a large team. You just need a very well-oiled machine, and you just need smart, dedicated, motivated people.
Yeah.
So to me, that's important. Yeah.
Do you know who Sam Bankman-Fried is?
No.
He's basically the CEO and co-founder of FTX. So he so like what you talked about is I think it's starting to actually become more of a trend and more cool. And a lot of folks are like they look up to like SBF is what they call him. This guy's like our age. He's 30, 31 years old. He's a billionaire. He's like a Bitcoin guy. He's like FTX is like the largest exchange behind like Coinbase or something like that, right? Like in the US.
Yeah, I just read his wiki. It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's so good. But one of the things is, so FTX is valued at I don't know how many billions of dollars, and
24. He's 24.
So I don't. Sorry. And 250 engineers is all it takes to run that company. And so he was asked like a question of like, so who do you think is wrong? Like, do you think you need more engineers to scale and make the company more valuable? And like the way that it's currently done now at Facebook, at Amazon, at Google, where you basically just stack and stack and stack and stack engineers. And, you have one engineer who just does like a very small subset of a product. And then you just accumulate like all these people. And then you have all these like crazy hierarchy structures, or do you think that, are you doing something different? Do you have an insight that like these other tech companies don't have? And 250 engineers is on purpose. Like you only keep 250 engineers to build this company because you see like an inefficiency in the way that they're doing something. And are you guys doing something that like nobody else is? And he was like, yeah, the latter. Like we only need 250 engineers. That's on purpose. The way that we're structured and what the engineers do on a day-to-day basis is completely different. And he wouldn't go into detail why, but like, how many people is, Sam Bankman-Fried like managing on a day-to-day basis? I don't know. But for a company of his size, 250 engineers is like an extremely small like company, right?
Yeah.
To what all the other competitors are doing. And so it kind of sounds like what you're doing at Alias, and keeping your team small on purpose is actually might, and we'll see how it works out over the long run, be actually a better use of your time and more profitable to the company, because you're actually able to like work on and optimize like work and revenue per engineer. And then when you actually start adding engineers on top of what is it you're doing, kind of like what the guys at Stripe did. Like they kept the team extremely small for a long time, and they basically try to increase the pound for pound that they're getting out of their engineering talent. And then they basically knew when to turn on the jets, and then they scaled the actual personnel size of the company to handle, more meaninless tasks or non-revenue generating tasks because they had enough money to actually do so now in the bank, and they could actually afford to do that.
So I think that's real. Like I do agree. So one thing that I'll kind of explain, this is my hunch on it, is that so AWS, in my opinion, will be looked back on as just absolutely groundbreaking. AWS has changed the game in terms of a single person can go and build an entire technology stack and application by themselves. That didn't happen 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you would need 20 people, all with diversified roles. Like AWS, if you actually kind of look at it, is its tools, but it's kind of like your own dev team because they've solved a lot of problems and you don't have to reinvent the wheel nearly as much. And that's why I think we scale well and we're able to build an entire application that's serving hundreds of clients and a lot of users because we're only coding. We're making the very right decisions using a lot of smartness and discussions, very right decisions in a small area. Everything else is just handled for us. We're just on a nicer layer of abstraction versus like, especially when I was working at Blackstone, you have all the support people and, the DevOps and the quality control, and you have so many layers and so many people. And then it just creates this giant bureaucracy and structure and hierarchy, and you end up lowering the efficiency on everybody versus just properly leveraging AWS, which I think is a game changer. And then I think early on is another piece too of like, right now, what matters is making really smart decisions and doing things the right way to set us up for a year, 5 years, 10 years from now. That's very, very important. And you don't really need you can't do it yourself because you should always have a sounding board. You need to get different perspective, but you're going to saturate the think tank after, once you get like 4 or 5 smart girls or guys in a room, they're going to make really good decisions. So I think after that is more, you get to a level like maybe you said about Stripe or something that once you get there and you set the basis, then you can go hire it out because you kind of structured it and you're like, okay, now I can look at this department and I know I can make more revenue if I throw 50 more people at this particular project. But the only reason that project is because you made kind of the right decisions even to structure it that way to begin with. So
yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, honestly, you mentioned the power and influence of automation and how it can, really leverage basically be a force multiplier on yourself, right? And the same is true of what AWS does to an average coder nowadays. So I'm sure we'll see that going forward, right? That roles that may exist today will no longer exist in the future, and the pound for pound value of a coder will become the new metric, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I guess that's a little bit self-serving because like I think I'm a pretty good developer, but like I hope that's kind of a cool notion that we're building tools to empower people. I mean, like like somebody in a week can build an entire application deployed to the cloud and it can serve millions of people. Like that can happen. That's absolutely insane. That would cost somebody $20 million 10 years ago before AWS. That's like, it's absolutely groundbreaking. And you have to be a little bit techie to kind of know why that is. But if you're not techie, just trust that AWS is really shaking the industry in terms of tooling. But it's all part of the same theory, even if it's not just AWS, it's just this notion that as tech continues to evolve, it's kind of concentrating. And I think you see this with big tech. Even if big tech has a lot of people in it, like Google is becoming a very powerful company. I think we're all kind of aware of that. Like monopolies and big tech is I have kind of a sticking point on that, but like the technology is becoming so powerful and it basically runs our lives now. But I do think that's a good point about how it's kind of empowering the employer, the individual to scale individually, which is kind of cool.
Well, here's a pointed question for you, Marcus. I want to hear your response. If you're talking to a 22-year-old, 24-year-old, someone who's either in undergrad or recently out of undergrad, how do you think they can tell whether they're fit for the startup world versus more of the corporate world?
So when you say the startup world, there's kind of 2 levels to the startup. I think there's kind of the founding level and then there's also kind of the employee type of level. Like, I think that there's differences, but there's a lot more similarities between like somebody that's, you know, the 10th developer at a startup and somebody that's the 100th developer at a corporate. Like, you're going to be doing similar things. Now, the startup is going to be a little bit more, I think you have to have a little bit more creativity, a little bit more grit. You got to be a little bit bought in. I'd say as a person, if your job is just to pay the bills, you're probably good in corporate life. If your job is important to your identity and building stuff is like important to your identity and motivates you, then startup is definitely for you. So I think it's actually like a little bit of a personal quality of like, and I'm not disrespecting it. There are very, very smart people that enjoy the corporate life and they do a great job and they're going to have amazing lives and they're going to be successful. But if you have that kind of instinct of like I wake up and I want to work. I love working. I actually I will work until I die because like work is part of my passion. I actually like when you build stuff, it's the most satisfying thing. So I think if you have some of that attitude, you should definitely get to a startup. And then I think if you want to be more of like the founding level of a startup, I think a quality that you need to have is you need to have a lot of creativity. I think creativity is a very underrated attribute in a lot of people. People talk a lot about like, oh, I need really smart people working for me. And you don't hear as much, people will say it, but they don't say, I need creative people. I think at that level, like you need to have a creative idea even to start it, but every single day is like what delivers value and grows the company is a creative problem solving. And I think that they almost correlate a little bit differently. I think that you can have the smartest people in the world and they're not that creative. And then generally speaking, I think very creative people are at least reasonably smart. But I think creativity and then like passion is a huge one. But then I'd also say I was kind of unique at Blackstone. I worked at Blackstone for 6 years. If you guys don't know, that's kind of unheard of in the software realm. That's a pretty long, especially coming out of college. It's a lot different to work from like when you're 30 to 36 versus straight out of college, work 6 straight years at a company. Part of that is because I really like the experience. Part of that is because I kind of needed a little pull to get outside of it. But I think like if anything, anybody should at least try it. I think that like you would be doing yourself a disservice, even if you think it may not be right for you. At least give it a shot and get the feel. And then I think it'll work itself out. You're either going to not like that culture, and you're going to be stressed by the fact the company may not exist tomorrow. If those things are going to stress you out, then you should go back to the corporate. But I think you never really know until you try it. And all I can say is I'm not going back, like I said earlier.
So when you make the decision to jump off from Blackstone to Alias, so kind of, there's some serendipitous moments that happen with meeting your co-founders and kind of, sounds like one of your co-founders had the original idea for So some background on him. So he was a CEO of another background check company before this, and he left that company because they weren't as invested into technology. He's like, at some point, like you start to see this, especially with non-tech companies, of the scalability is just not there. Like you can keep throwing growth, like more employees, more revenue, but you can't 10x that revenue. Essentially, that's really hard to do without either a really creative idea that's outside of technology or you use technology itself. So I think he came to the realization that was it. And I think there was a little bit of old thinking at that company of like investors and owners and leadership was thinking, okay, we got a system that works. Why take this risk? Why take that bet? He's like, come on, like I'm not, I want to be somebody. I want to build something. I want to do something dramatic. I want to revolutionize. So he left that and then just like wanted to start this company and then reached out and we went from there. But that's part of it too. Like that's an important relationship to have with somebody like that you're bought into the technology. This is not some CTO role like in Blackstone where I'm just supporting a business. Like we are augmenting our existing business model, but long term, like Alias will be associated with technology. Like it's going to be known as a tech company. And actually, I want to transition it outside of even background checks, and we want to just be an intelligence company. I want to be a company that you ask me on a given person or a given entity, you say, I want to know how many jet skis they have or how many clubs are they in or just something about that we are able to service large amounts of data and present it in an effective way and then scale that. A lot of technical challenges to get there. But that's what I'm kind of excited about. But the scalability is a big thing. And it was serendipitous that he reached out, but like, you only need to say a few words to really get me, but those words need to be correct. And he said all of the right words that said this guy gets it. And then also there's just the personality match of like, I think that he's got a level of, just that kind of dragon energy, that raw, competitive vibe. He's extremely competitive. I'm extremely competitive. And I think that builds off of each other. And I think that's really important because it's like, at the end of the day, like we're not just messing around here. This is business. This is make or break. This is serious stuff. I'm not just doing 9 to 5 here. We're both bought into this. So I think that's really important to have. I mean, in any sort of like founding relationship.
I like that. So, Marcus, what's the dream? Like, what's your vision for 5 years from now for Alias?
So I want an office. That's a big one. So I need to solve that. I think it's going to be in Austin. I'm growing to really like Austin. So I want to have a tech shop in Austin. Want to have a decent amount of people. But really, like, my dream is a couple things. So one, I want to get that name. I want to get some prestige out there. I just went to like an HR tech conference last week, and we're just kind of scan competition, see what's going on, and like, I don't just want a booth. I want either the biggest booth, or I want to be the people that don't even go to that conference because they're almost above it. So I want prestige for the company. I want to be well known on that. And then also, like, obviously I say the word value a lot. Like, that's very important to me. Like, I want to grow the company. I want this company to be successful. And at the end of the day, I mean, you can beat around the bush, but I want to make some money. Like, I think that's important to me. I'm a pretty money driven guy. It's important to like build something that you care about. And I care about all my technology and my team. But if it wasn't for money, I wouldn't be doing this. So like, that's a very important drive to me. So I want to grow the company. I want to get it successful. And then I don't know what it's there. You know, that's another interesting thing is like background checks. Like, I would not have necessarily gotten into this field per se. But then I kind of took a step back, and it is like a very interesting problem, right? Because it's a big data problem. And it's kind of an interesting problem. It's a little controversial too, right? It gets into privacy. And then at the end of the day, and it can scale too. The market is unbelievable on this sort of stuff. Everybody is getting into that. You guys are probably aware in terms of like both for employment and just know your customer. There's so much out there. The market is large. You have the upside. It's a little bit backwards of an industry. So just revolutionize the industry, make the company well known and successful, grow the company. And then also, this is a big one for me personally, is like, I've grown to really care about my team, not just as employees, but as friends. That's really important to me. So like, my dream vision is like, it's not just we're going onto my yacht and having caviar and champagne. Like, everybody on my team at this point of the company, we're all going to be on yachts together. So like, and that's kind of cool. Like, I'd love to take kind of the underdogs, like not the smartest guy at Google that's making $400,000 a year. And some of the people I've hired have been like a little bit of dark horses, kind of burn out at their job, and take them and like help them grow, and then bring them to an opportunity that maybe they would have never had if I didn't help them get there. That's something that would, I think, feel so fulfilling to me, to have that, and to have like the underdog story, and we're all just like Wolf of Wall Streeting it. That would be the good parts of that stuff.
Minus the whole.
Edit that one out. Yeah. Minus the FBI and some of the.
That's a keyword I'm not sure we want on our podcast. But,
yeah, that's gonna flag you.
That's awesome. Any other questions you want to ask, Tom?
Well, I mean, yeah, from my end, I think what's the biggest piece of advice you give to just someone young starting their career that you'd impart that you wish you would
know? Network. I think that's a common one. I don't think you can like a lot of growth comes from networking, and I think people misunderstand the word network sometimes. It doesn't mean just like getting business cards and, you know, having 500 plus connections on LinkedIn. It really means like maintaining and building relationships that actually matter too. So finding the right people and building a relationship with them, following up with them, I think that one is a critical one. And then I think a lot of it is like, I wish I would have taken more risks. I think risk taking is totally acceptable when you're young. It's really hard to do. I think that's a big one. You got to take risks, especially while you're young, because when you start to realize it, especially like if you're in technology, like the worst case scenarios, you always have fallbacks too. So why not just give it a shot and see if you like it? And then other than that, I don't know, like specific advice I'd give to people. Have a lot of energy. I think one of the qualities that I look at most, and I think is one of the most valuable, I kind of said creativity, but like passion really matters. And I think passion is, it's contagious. Like, I think that if I come into a room with my team and I do a lot and I talk like this and I'm animated and I'm excited and I don't look like I care, I legitimately care about the stuff that we're building. It really trickles all around you, up and down, to the entire company, to everybody, even in your personal life. I think just be like very passionate about the things you do. I think that's a very nice quality. Sometimes it's kind of hard for people to be passionate. There's kind of a variance between people of how passionate they are naturally. Sure. But I think you gotta like what you're doing too. I mean, again, these kind of come down to corny phrases like love what you do, or like you shouldn't work a day in your life if you love what you do. But like I think that they're totally correlated with each other. Like, I think you got to find something that you love, that you can be passionate about. because it also makes working fun. Like that's a big difference. Like it kind of work-life balance is an interesting thing, but like it sounds weird, but I don't really have a work-life balance because like work is my life and life is my work. And I do have like a life outside of this too. But like your work-life balance to some degree should be replaced by like enjoying work and thinking about work. So I like that. Yeah. I mean, I like live and breathe work, but it depends. Some people are different, but I think that like, passion is really good, risk taking, and then networking is a big piece too. I wouldn't deny that. Networking is what got me here. So like, you got to look back on that and think that like every networking like piece that you do is just a potential opportunity. Could just be a 1%er, 1% that works out at the right time. But like having like 100 sets of 1% odds is definitely better than having no percent. Like it does amount over time, and at some point, like God willing, you're gonna get that lucky stroke, and it happened to me. And I think that's kind of the way things work. I think it's a little bit of like a karmic thing of just like network with people, be good to people, and then it'll come back at you. So.
Who would have thought all these years later, Marcus, that as an engineer, you'd be talking about the importance of networking?
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And this is coming, like you said, this is coming for the complete like devil's advocate opposite type of situation. Because I probably talked to you when we were rooming together, Tom, about like how stupid it is. And I don't want to talk to anybody and it doesn't matter. And I never did it. I didn't like interviewing. I don't like career fairs. I don't really like talking to people. What's the point? He's not even in my industry. Like he doesn't decide how much money I make. But like it doesn't matter. Like you never know. That's the answer to it.
Yeah, it's the power of network synergies across people, making the most of groups. And I feel like you have some really valuable perspectives here, and I'm glad that we have you on the podcast for those who are really kind of establishing and finding their niche, going into a role that really carves out a space for them to learn and grow. From V 1.0 of themselves to V 2.0, and then really through that process diagnose, my passion is beyond just clocking in 9 to 5, 8 to 5, 5 to 5, whatever it may be. It's about creating and building something, and that in that way I want it to be intertwined with my work and life and make a leap into the startup world. I think that's what this podcast is all about. How to assess whether to take the leap, how to succeed once you take the leap, and what you learn along the entire way. So I'm glad that we have you on here.
That's awesome.
But Marcus, I'm glad we got to make this happen, man.
Yes.
I know you're tough to pin down.
I'm a little bit non-responsive sometimes, but I definitely wanted to get this done. And this is a good time. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me again.